there. Let's start with the guys that I think have been the two best rookies basically since February. I would argue that these two guys have been the two best rookies. I am at the point where I think that Steph Castle is probably rookie of the year now. What he's been able to do over the last 25 games as compared to what like Jalen Wells, who I thought in reality probably should have been the rookie of the year through the first, 55 games of the year, 50 games of the year, whatever it was, 60 games of the year even. I think Castle over the last like 15 games particularly has really elevated himself and probably surpassed Wells at this point, even though the Spurs aren't really playing for much. I do think that Castle's performances have been really impressive. Over since the start of February, he's averaging 17.8 points, 4 rebounds, 3.6 assists, shooting 46.5% from the field, 31% from three, 73% from the line. But a lot of the time he is getting like a real opportunity to, run ball screens, run sets, kind of be the primary guy there. And I don't think that's his future. Obviously, they wouldn't have traded for De'Aaron Fox otherwise, but I think that getting these reps and getting these opportunities, I think will continue to allow him to grow when he plays next to De'Aaron Fox and potentially allow Victor Wembanyama, playing with two like real guards, maybe as soon as next season, who can really be playmakers on the ball, to get the ball in even more advantageous situations. Like if they can drive downhill, if they can like really, collapse the paint regularly and then pitch back on trailer shots to Wembanyama when he's coming down, like it's going to create a much more efficient Victor Wembanyama, which is even more scary than what I think the league wants to see across the board right now.
Yeah, I like that you bring up that he's getting those on-ball reps. That's what I watched in a recent game when they played Detroit, where he was the offensive initiator. Even with Chris Paul on the floor, it was still Steph Castle running the ball screens. But I think ultimately he ends up being a secondary creator, advantage exploiter off those two guys. But then maybe he runs your second unit whenever De'Aaron Fox steps off the floor. I think Castle, other than the jumper, has the requisite skills to be good in that. I think he could be impactful offensive rebounder. He's very athletic. I think he'll be an instinctual cutter in that role. But I like seeing him get these reps in what is a season for the Spurs with these injuries where they can afford to give him exploratory reps and let him try things out, see what it looks like. And what I noticed in that game in particular, he was not good in the first half in that game offensively. And then he came out in the second half and was just as aggressive, just as confident. And he started knocking down shots. He started putting the ball in the basket. He's very physical with his drives. I'm interested to get your thoughts on the way he attacks, because there were times I was concerned with his lack of ability to create separation and some wiggle and stuff like that. But I also came away impressed with the physicality he was able to play with to go ahead and get to the rim or get a shot off. So do you have any concerns in terms of maybe he just hasn't figured out the spacing of things yet and the pace of it? Well, do you think he needs a little more wiggle to his game, I guess is my question.
I think he's actually quite good in terms of like understanding spaces typically, but he tends to do it best when like defenses are bent, in my opinion. And that, like, if I was evaluating him as a future primary on-ball player, I would be a little bit worried about the lack of separation and the fact that he doesn't really like get away from his man all that regularly and does kind of have to power up and like go through dudes, right? But given that I think he's going to be more of like a secondary guy next to De'Aaron Fox and occasionally run second units, I think it's going to be a little bit easier for him a lot of the time. Like, I think that he's probably not going to have to as consistently, separate in that way. If he's going to get bent defenses like on a reversal from Wembanyama, or, De'Aaron Fox drives and kicks it out to him. And, that's why to me, the swing skill still in terms of him being an all-star just does remain the jumper, right? Because if he can shoot it off the catch in a significant way, it's really hard to guard him. Like almost impossible to guard him, frankly, because if you have to watch like his closeout, if someone's coming at him and he's able to blow by and then he's able to power up once he gets that real like momentum going forward toward the rim, I do think that is something that will really make it hard to deal with him on a consistent basis. I like the mid-range game to an extent already as well. I think that he has that like kind of footwork to be able to get into those shots pretty consistently. It does just kind of come down to the shooting as to whether or not he's going to be an all-star. If he becomes like a 38% three-point shooter, like, look, this is why, like, when he was in the draft, I thought that there was like an outside chance that there were some Jimmy Butler-y kind of outcomes. I'll pull up the draft guide while we're talking and kind of remember exactly what I wrote. But like the physicality, the strength, that's all there, and that's all really, really sharp. And he has that kind of junkyard dog mentality to find those like dirty area buckets on cuts and like just understanding how to get easy buckets a lot of the time. So I've been really impressed with Castle. Like the efficiency is not great because he's still not a great shooter, but I think the general process by and large, I think is still pretty good.
Yeah, I was looking through my notes as we were prepping for this, and the off the ball stuff I made note of. He understood relocations and floor spacing, timely cutting, offensive rebound, but as you just outlined, got to be able to knock down open catch and shoot opportunities. But to our point here, major plus as a second side creator and attacking unsettled scrambling defenses, because he does have this background of being able to play with the ball in his hand and making reads and those type of things, which when you do it attacking a closeout, it really, really comes into play. And then you mentioned his defense. I went back to previous games this season and my notes defensively where I was really impressed, because in that recent Pistons game, I wasn't. But he wasn't bad. It just wasn't as impactful. I wonder if that's because he was doing so much offensively, though. And for a rookie to be doing what he's being asked to do offensively now without Fox and Wemby, I assume his defensive intensity and just the energy he can provide and the impact on that end is going to take a step back. But I think he has the ability to be a really, really impactful defender, which is something we've talked about going all the way back to last draft cycle, where I think we both would consider him one of the best pure perimeter defenders in that class.
1,000%. Like, I think he is like a very real physical on-ball defender. It'll be interesting to compare and contrast him and Risacher, I think, defensively, because I think they both do a lot of things really, really well on that end, while also like kind of having a few holes here and there. Like, I think that Castle is a monster on-ball defender. Like, I think that he is just so physical with the way that he goes about it there. So with the summary, like what I wrote with Castle is that, you know, his floor, and I had him ranked third last year. I think I would have him at number one if I had to redo a draft right now. And I probably will do that at the end of the year at the Athletic. I basically said, like, his floor is as a contributor who helps you win important games, even in the NBA, due to his defensive prowess and on-ball ability. And if the jumper ever develops, he's one of the few players in this class with a realistic all-star ceiling. I don't know if I actually made the Jimmy Butler kind of point of comparison that I thought I did, but that is kind of what it reminds me of right now. Like, it's like a nascent, you know, you can see the world where it's going, but like, you know, there are a couple guys like this in the NBA right now. There's, you know, Jalen Williams is another guy that I've kind of comped to this player type. And I think Jalen is just drastically farther ahead of where Steph is, but Jalen's 3 years older than Steph too, right? So Jalen has physical tools in terms of the wingspan that Steph doesn't necessarily have, but I think that Steph has some of like the gather footwork a little bit earlier than what Jalen had, right? So I would be pumped if I was a Spurs fan when it came to Castle. I think he has been so great in this little run. And like I said, like, he would be my pick for rookie of the year right now. I will say, like, the next guy we're going to talk about, though, I think is probably getting a little bit underrated in that discussion, though.
Yeah, I think Castle's been really good. As I've continued to follow this, right now, as it stands, I've probably moved him ahead in my rookie of the year rankings. Also, if we were doing it right now, obviously we still have 10 games. And I think things have been close enough throughout the whole year. I don't know that 10 games swing it a whole lot one way or the other, but that's where I would lean right now without a super deep dive into it. I just find him to be very, very interesting in all of the different ways he can impact the game offensively and defensively.
Let's get to a quick little note from Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money action. There are over 10 million members. Like I said a second ago, they invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks always puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. We are big fans of Prize Picks here. We absolutely love the app and what they're doing for the daily fantasy sports scene. Download the app today and use code GameTheory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use that code GameTheory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. The next player I want to go to is Zaccharie Risacher.
Yeah.
I have loved Risacher recently. I think he has been awesome for the Hawks. Basically, again, I would argue since like he came back from that little like injury that he had where he missed like 6 or 7 games, if I remember correctly. Since the start of February, he's averaging 15 points, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist, shooting 52, 42, 76. Now, the thing that I will say about Risacher is the thing that we have been saying since the middle of last season when he was playing for Borg in France. He goes through ridiculously hot stretches as a shooter, and he goes through ridiculously cold stretches as a shooter. And we've seen it throughout his career at this point. And right now he's in the middle of an absolute heater. And I love it. Like, I'm really excited. He's drilled 43% of his threes over the course of the last 25 games. Right. And he's not taking, a minimal amount of them. He's taking 5 threes a game. I will say, like, the jumper, I don't know how you feel about the mechanics, but like, I think they're still funky and kind of hitchy a little bit, where like sometimes it's a clean release. Sometimes it's like a little bit more of a moon ball. Sometimes it's flatter. Sometimes like his base is a little bit wider. Sometimes it's like a little bit too narrow, I think. And it's all workable to me because I think he has real touch, but like, it's just going to take a couple of years, I think, to iron this all out. To me, like, he's not like a Brandon Miller level shooter. He's a streakier shooter than that to me right now. But where I want to close on this is I think I have liked literally every single other aspect of his game over the course of like the last 2 months. I think he's been like really, really high level for a rookie, kind of across the board for a wing.
Well, I think the other thing with him is I think he's already trying to explore the different attempts and the way he gets a shot off from 3. He will no dip. He will pick and pop.
Yes.
He will get in transition. He'll get it from the corner. And so when you're already streaky and then you're trying to do all of those things on top of it, it can make you even more inconsistent. I'm not trying to like insult anybody here, but if you don't understand how hard it is to shoot a no dip catch and shoot, just go to the gym or go outside and shoot 5 of them. Have your whoever throw you a pass right here, like here, and then don't bring the ball down, shoot it right from there. And it is much different than the fluidity and the flow of catching in your shooting pocket and then going in from there. And again, I'm like not trying to call people out, but if you kind of want to understanding, you can really feel the difference in those two things. So I love that he's still trying those things. But to your point, the most recent game I watched, he got so many different play types. He was the pick and roll man on possession. He had a left-hand poster dunk as he shows off some athleticism. Then he got a transition relocation, corner catch and shoot 3, then a transition cut and finish. It was all in the first 6 minutes of the game. And then in the fourth quarter, he has a perfectly timed baseline cut and an offensive rebound putback. I just watch him, and I think similar to where you're at, and I go, the process of all of this is really good. He plays the game that way. He's doing a bunch of different play types. It's really impressive. He has to consistently make shots. But I find myself very intrigued, not as a high level, maybe all-star guy, because I don't know that there's a whole lot of handle or whatever with that, but just as a play finisher, as more than just a shooter, Sam, like not a play finisher just with catch and shoot threes, but as a cutter, a roll man, a transition guy.
I also kind of like some of the growth he's made as a driver too. More like attacking closeouts than anything. And sometimes in transition and semi-transition, where like he had that one play that you mentioned where he had the massive like lefty dunk, like that was in semi-transition, and he like put the ball behind his back and like got it into his left hand and then like, you know, cocked it and threw down with his left hand. Right. Like that was super creative. I thought that was really, really fun and really, really sharp to be able to get to that spot. And I just feel like he's a little bit more like aggressive and decisive with his drives now than he was earlier in the year. And part of that could be that like teams realize he's in the middle of a heater right now. They're closing out on him a little bit lower. Bryce, turn your microphone up a little bit. And I think that where I'm excited about it is that he's continuing to grow in terms of that confidence and continuing to grow in terms of just how comfortable he feels on the court and like his willingness to get to like the dirty areas of the court. Like he still needs space to elevate, right? Like he's not really like throwing down like posters. You know what I mean? Like in traffic on dudes. But if he gets some space to elevate, like he'll elevate like off of 1 foot and throw down too, if he has that little bit of room to be able to go up because he's so big at 6'9" to 6'10". So I like the process of what I've seen from Risacher. Like you said, I think that, you know, he averages like 1 assist per game. I think that kind of undersells what he is as a passer, even. Like he is mostly a play finisher, but I do think he like really does a good job of kind of moving it around the perimeter and making quick decisions. Like we're going to talk about like Modest and Ron Holland a little bit later. I think the difference between Risacher and those guys right now is that everything with Risacher is very quick. It doesn't feel like there's any pause when he catches and like has to like make a decision. With Modest and Ron, I feel like there's a pause. With Risacher, I feel like he knows exactly what he's doing when he catches the ball every time. And that's just like such a massive, massive piece of how to go about building if you're the Atlanta Hawks now moving forward. And the funny thing is like a lot of this has happened without Jalen Johnson. Again, this is why when you and I talked about this in the preseason and when he was like a draft prospect, we adored this fit with like Jalen Johnson and Risacher, because Risacher is just like the corner guy who can lift and then like make decisions really quickly and can take advantage of Jalen Johnson's athleticism. And oh, by the way, Jalen Johnson like driving to the rim, Risacher is going to be able to like cut off of him at a really high level. So everything I've seen from Risacher, I'm just like really, really excited about right now.
I've mentioned this a few times, but this is one of my favorite wing rooms in the NBA with what Dyson Daniels has done. I put this in my notes, and it's one reason why I stayed bullish on Risacher throughout the whole process, even when he was struggling to make shots last year and people were dropping him on their boards. I know this is coach speak, Sam, but I just watched him and thought he played the game the right way. I thought he moved to the right spots. I thought he kept the flow of the offense. I thought he made the correct passes, like all of the stuff we're seeing now in the NBA. And then you just saw the flashes of the confidence and the athleticism. We mentioned the left-hand dunk. He also has a lot of just left-hand finishing attempts, and not always fruitful, not always efficient, but I love that he's trying those things. His confidence has actually been better, and we're going to use this word with a few of these guys, but his confidence has been more than what I even thought it might be, as he can go through stretches where he doesn't make shots and then he'll still make some big ones later. What about defensively, Sam? Where are you at on that end of the floor? Because you kind of mentioned the comparison between him and Steph Castle. I think Steph is definitely better at the point of attack. I think where Zach's overall, impact is going to be as similar to what we talked about offensively. I think off the ball defensively, he can be real impactful, low man rotator and rim protector stuff, even potentially, but just being in the right spots positionally on the defensive end.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm so glad you brought up the idea of more like team-based defense. You know what I mean? That's where he excels. Like I still do have some questions about him on the ball, like in getting leveraged against guards in switch situations, right? But I think he does a good job of like staying big in those moments too, and just like using the full extent of his 6'9" frame. You know what I mean? Yep. Like he is really good on the weak side of just like staying as big as possible and trying to cut off as many angles as he possibly can. I think he rotates really, really well kind of across the court. I think he flies around and really tries to like find the right X out, find the right place where he's supposed to be, right? Scrambles really at a high level. He's not like a defensive playmaker or anything, in my opinion. Like he's never going to be some guy that averages 1.5 steals and 1 point, maybe he gets to a block, but like I think I'd be surprised by that. Like it really takes some growth in terms of where he's at. But I do like how he scrambles around. I think he's sharp in the way that he maneuvers around the court and finds his way around it and really does a good job of making sure that they continue to stay in rotation and flying around.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll be impactful that way. And when you have Dyson Daniels doing everything he does, they don't need him to be overly disruptive with what, he's doing on the defensive end. And that's always part of this is I just think he fits really well. I'm glad you brought that up with his fit next to Jalen Johnson, also his fit next to Dyson Daniels, and then all of those guys collectively with Trae Young just kind of running the offense. When they're healthy, he doesn't have to do a whole lot of creation. What he does offensively fits really well because Jalen can do some of that. Dyson can do some of that. So in terms of fitting into that starting lineup, he makes a whole lot of sense. I've been really, really impressed with his game. I've felt good. I had him number 2 on my board behind another guy we'll talk about later. And I feel really good about that. In a draft where it was like, can you just find guys that are going to be solid starters? And shoot, maybe he has more upside than I was even giving him credit for, as you mentioned some of the off the bounce game.
I think there's some room for upside still here. Yeah. Like, I think he's probably going to be like really perfectly slotted as Atlanta's like number 3 option, assuming that like Trae Young sticks around there. We'll see what that looks like in the offseason. His contract is, shortening day by day here. So they're going to have to make a choice on if they want to continue to build around Trae and these big wings, or if they want to build around big wings and like a different star guard, or try and go out and find another star. Right. I'll be fascinated. And Trae's obviously going to have a say in that as well. So where I think I am on Risacher is that he's perfectly slotted as like a number 3 option right now. I love the way he's slotted as a number 3 guy. I think that it makes sense to me. And, look, they're contending now for a play-in berth, like likely a playoff berth, given the way that, the teams at the bottom there are rolling right now. With him, I don't know. Would you argue that I guess that like Harris has probably been their number 2 guy since he got there in terms of offense, and like Dyson continues to be efficient as a playmaker, but semi-efficient, I guess, as a playmaker. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I don't know. Like he's been like their 3rd guy here he's somewhere between their 2nd and 4th guy on, any given night, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the starting lineup, I would say he's definitely the 3rd offensive option, right? Behind Mo and then Okongwu. So even if Dyson, like I actually was agree with you. I was kind of shaking my head back and forth on like trying to figure out what option he was. I think when they start a game, he's the 3rd offensive option on the floor. Like Okongwu will obviously it's part of things, and they'll play through him a little bit, let him make passes and stuff like that. But yeah, you obviously have Karras off the bench. I always like to bring up Niang because, man, that dude is just living his best life, getting 3-point attempts up. I love it.
He really is.
I mean, this is a really cool role for him. And listen, they're going to play at least 2 postseason games, and that's worst case scenario based off where the standings are at right now. And maybe they get into it would be a blast to evaluate him against the Cavs or the Celtics. I don't think they're going to really compete with those teams, but I would have a whole lot of fun watching him. Like, that would be my fascination for turning that series on, was what does he look like? How do they respect him as a shooter? What if he goes on a slump? Can he get himself out of it? Defending some of those guys in those scenarios. I think it would be amazing for him. And I think it would be great data for the Hawks about him.
I think that's right. Rookie of the year conversation, just to close, because I do think it's going to come down to these two, given the way that they're finishing the season. All due respect to Jalen Wells, he will almost certainly be number 3 on my ballot this year if I had a ballot that was official. But like, over the course of his last 11 games, he's averaging 6 points a game, shooting 27% from the field. He's really hit a wall, it feels like to me. So I would guess it's going to come down to these two. Can Risacher do anything to pass Castle for you? I feel like he could, if he really went nuts here in these last 3 weeks, but it would take a pretty special jump to me. The issue for me is Risacher, even still with the way he's playing, the finishing has been, so. If you look over the course of the full season, it's he's finishing at 48% on his half court rim attempts so far this year. And he's just not a particularly explosive player, right? So it's just not wildly stunning. But yeah, I'm interested to kind of run through and see where he falls. And by the way, Castle isn't much better now that he's been playing more on ball. He's at 52%. So, we're talking about two guys here that Risacher is in the role he probably should be in and is producing. Castle is, getting a chance to really run the show a little bit more and do things. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to land on it.
I think where I've come to is I'm going to have to spend a little more time on that come the end of the season than maybe what I felt like I needed to the last time. And I feel pretty good about some of these guys definitely being first team. I was thinking about my first team all rookie just in general the other day and was okay, I feel like this guy's really played well enough. He's absolutely in this spot now. And this guy has as well, et cetera. So it's going to make for a really fun conversation where I think both of us, just a few weeks ago were very much, this is probably Jalen Wells to lose right now because he's starting and being very impactful on a good team. I mean, that's the thing. Even with the Spurs, without these guys, in March, they went 7-7. It's not like they've lost every single game. The Hawks over their, 12 games in March are 8-4. So these guys are still playing on somewhat competitive basketball teams. And as you mentioned with Risacher, a team in the play-in. So it's not nothing basketball where their teams are completely tanking. I know the San Antonio would probably maybe want to lose a little bit more, but it's still, it's not, like I say, not like they've lost 10 straight over this stretch or something.